The PlayStation 2 and its contemporaries, by late in those consoles' life cycles, had such a flood of quality releases that it defines the era as one of the best in video game history. Genres were being refined, franchises were reaching their heights, series were being resurrected and were better than ever, and new technology was being integrated and perfected. Underneath all of this, From Software was still making weird and great games. Games like Otogi, Metal Wolf Chaos, and Shadow Tower Abyss were just weird, but still offered so much flavor to the games of this era. Armored Core would remain their staple series during this time, and Armored Core Nexus and Armored Core Last Raven are certainly not FromSoft resting on their laurels. While earlier games in this series were constantly iterating and refining, the rest of the industry was advancing at a much faster rate, and critics throughout the PS2 era criticized AC for being stale and repetitive. While I don't agree and think a lot of their opinions were flawed in this era, From Software clearly took notice, and Armored Core Nexus was their attempt to redefine the series. With its sleeker presentation and loads of content, Nexus was an attempt to satisfy naysayers and newcomers alike. Last Raven, on the other hand, is the opposite and seeks to provide the ultimate challenge of the series. Both games offer pretty drastic changes to the format and play, and certainly were ambitious in their own ways. How good they are is pretty divisive, but they do offer a pretty satisfying conclusion to the old style of Armored Core. While most people know more about Last Raven, Nexus is really important to that title, so let's go into that. Now before we start, a quick note. These two games are the second half of the third gen of Armored Core. You might assume that a lot would carry over from knowing that, but it's not a ton. Parts from 3 and Silent Line are in this game, and it takes place multiple years later, but that doesn't matter too much. Now with that out of the way, there isn't much to talk about the CG intro of Nexus. It's kinda just whatever.
Armored Core Nexus.
Oh my god. While this is the third game in this gen, no playthrough data can be carried over from Silent Line, which is fine considering how much has changed. Regardless, during the initial settings you're given a new option, dual analog control. Classic tank controls are an option if you still want to use them, but this dual analog setup works extremely well. All of the options for movement and combat are much more accessible, a great step forward for choice. You also get a decent cutscene which sets the scene for typical Raven fare and explains the setting. In a world where corporations rule and conflict is ever present, mercenaries called Ravens take jobs from this game's mercenary mediation group, the Ravens Arc. You can really tell they're focusing on the in-game cinematics and presentation. It's a big part of this game. Afterwards, you're just tossed into the menu with access to everything and hold on a second, the music! This soundtrack is really good. So many tracks are just so listenable. It goes back to the electronic roots that the first games had, with some more realistic instruments thrown in there as well. While some tracks are a little goofy, they use vocals not as lyrics, but as instruments. It makes it good and distinct rather than just making everything off-putting and strange. Almost every single track in this game is unique and works at setting the tone, while also just being a great listen. There is another section of the soundtrack, but we'll talk about that in the post-game. This OST is one of my favorites of all time. Just look at the physical soundtrack release. Even this had so much care put into it. Absolute top tier aesthetic design. Back to this menu, being directly thrown in won't matter too much for fans, but I don't find it a great hook for anyone expecting an intro mission, or even a mission that acts as an initiation to becoming a Raven. When you do get to the first mission, it's extremely short and very simple. Now, playing this mission, this game feels pretty different when compared to previous games. Weight, speed, and heat all got changed in a huge way. Your AC can now build up heat specifically from using your boosters in an inefficient build. Your AC cannot build up heat specifically from using your boosters in an inefficient build. Building heat is dangerous because at a certain point, your radiator enters an emergency mode and drains your energy really fast. After that, if your radiator can't keep up, your AC will take pretty bad damage, essentially acting like poison in an RPG until your AC cools off. This usually leads to more moments where you run out of energy, and considering the fact that movement is more important than ever in this game, it leads to the play experience being more restrictive. More weapons will also incur heat damage. Using an overboost will send your heat skyrocketing. This game's movement is extremely punishing. This is in addition to top speed and acceleration changes, which is now dynamic depending on your weight. While your top speed is dependent on your weight in every other game, in previous games it was static in missions. Remember dropping weapons in Armored Core 3 and how it didn't really matter? Now, dropping empty weapons or really low weapons is essential, because in this and Last Raven, that affects your current speed, energy drain, and all of that. The less weaponry you have, the better your AC functions on all other levels, and you're gonna need every ounce of speed you can get. This game's speed can reach much greater heights than all of the previous games in the series, and enemies will sometimes take advantage of that, and you need to keep up with them. Or you could try to tank it. This feeds into the changes in customization. The heat, energy generation, and booster speed all need to be in harmony, or else you'll be constantly taking heat damage, run out of energy to use on boosting, or be really slow. Because of all this, energy weapons are also nerfed a lot, because energy is such a vital resource now. A lot of weapons got nerfed from Silent Line actually. Whole types got their rules changed to be just effective at only their intended ranges. Machine gun accuracy got hit extremely hard, rifles don't do a lot of damage, and the formerly incredible GNL-15 got its fire rate cut down immensely. Blade damage got severely nerfed. It's not as open as AC3. A lot of weapons now have a reload time, which cuts down on the fire rate that most weapons had in earlier games. You've got to plan around this and adapt accordingly. One more thing to worry about in combat. Not all of Nexus changes are bad though. You can now, for a price, tune each non-weapon part to fit your build better. This can add some cool progression if your AC is decked out. It can make some parts much more effective. Most parts allow you to tune defense and cooling, so you can mitigate a lot of the issues an AC might have. Cores now have a hangar bay for small weapons. When you ditch a left or right-handed weapon, your AC will pause and pull out a backup weapon if you've got one in storage. This mechanic was absolutely essential for me. It saved me on numerous occasions. If you're someone who likes to keep a blade on you so you have an infinite damage source, you can equip one in the hangar bay. This makes left-handed guns much more viable, an excellent addition. It's clear that the focus on AC building in Nexus had a different design focus and goal. They wanted to limit variety and expression for the simulation instead. Armored Core building was deliberately something to solve now. Having clear winners and losers in parts limits variety in what you can make, and that kind of sucks. Not that every part should be equally balanced, but it feels too restrictive. There is an appeal in the simulation though, and I do find it satisfying to finally make a well-oiled machine that is very effective. I would never argue this is better than a more open sandbox, and if this completely turns someone off from playing this game, then I completely understand that. There's a reason I didn't finish this game until like last March. Because your initial AC isn't really effective at anything, and you need to upgrade a lot of parts in conjunction with each other in order for them to be effective, I find the beginning of this game to be pretty rough. There is another crack in the formula here, and that has to do with reselling parts. In previous games, in order to encourage variety, the buy and sell prices of all parts were equal to each other. This encouraged player experimentation and was the key to the formula of customization, and it made those games a lot better than they otherwise would have been. In Nexus, when you use a part on a mission, that part becomes used, and it has much worse resale value. This makes experimentation severely limited and disincentivized, and in my opinion, was a major mistake. It was one of those things that technically makes the game more realistic and more sim-like, but it's for no gain. There is one thing that helps, that's the fact that you earn a ton of money in this game. Missions give an abnormally large amount of money, and once you start winning some missions and start to get a decent feeling AC, the game does become a lot better. It also helps that the game's structure is pretty dynamic and starts to do some cool things. Nexus will change and give you different missions depending on your mission performance and other previous missions chosen, and it's pretty adaptive. This game recognizes your consistent successes and losses, and who you choose to accept missions from will affect the future missions to a certain extent. This is pretty cool. It makes each playthrough slightly unique and adds a ton to the experience, even if the final stretch of the game is pretty much the same no matter what. This progression and escalation of your feats feeds into the ranking menu, which is back from Armored Core 1. The top 30 Ravens all have a mission execution score, and this determines where Ravens land. Most Ravens retain a consistent rank, but there are a few Ravens that will move in rank, most notable of which is Evangel, who acts as your rival in this game. He shows up in a couple of arena fights that you can accept, and he's a good way of testing your evolving AC and skills. I do find they could have done more with him though. With how much the game talks him up, he doesn't get to do much. His AC also stays the same throughout the game. It would have been cool if he made his AC better throughout the course of the game. You might have noticed I said a couple of arena fights earlier, and that is because the ranking system has replaced the standard arena mode. Instead, you get the opportunity to fight other Ravens in an arena format as a mission. This allows for cool moments where other Ravens get the chance to have a refight with you, and you can see them improve their skills.
You don't stand a chance with that AC.
AP at 50%.
I won't forget you. You won't be so lucky this time. Possible.
It's cool, and because they act as mission selections, the same adaptiveness of those apply to this as well. It's not a good thing that it replaced the side mode in the traditional arena, but it's at the very least pretty interesting. It helps build out some other Ravens that live in this world. It adds some nice spice to the play experience. Other missions tend to be pretty standard, if shorter than usual. Some missions are pretty good, cause you can just win.
Raven, we have to get clear of the area.
Main system engaging combat.
They're using electronic countermeasures. Don't lose sight of the helicopter.
Mission objective achieved. System switch to normal mode.
For real though, these can range in quality, but most of the time they're pretty standard. Some mission starts are straight up evil though.
The test will begin shortly. We need to collect accurate data. Please ensure that you give this operation your full attention.
Like, huh? There isn't a lot to talk about in the designs. The typical Armored Core fare of destroying all targets, defending from waves of enemies, killing all the aircraft, yada yada. You don't get a lot of world details from the missions themselves, rather the text around it. Said text tends to be from after mission emails, and these range from news broadcasts to personal mail. The news you can read is pretty interesting, because it's always presented from the perspective of an org who doesn't know the full story. It usually has official statements from the corps involved. It really grounds the fact that Ravens are hired to do the dirty work, to cross that red tape and to commit crimes. Not crimes like filling out fake taxes for them, but bad stuff like killing innocents and organic weapon experimentation. It also helps to ground the events of most missions by providing consequences of the events that happened. Now, I find this text isn't great at getting someone into the game's story, but once you start to get into Nexus, it becomes decent flavor text. This is fine. I don't think Dark Souls item descriptions work by themselves, for example, but those are also pretty decent. Admittedly, I don't think Nexus's news emails are as good as Dark Souls 1's narrative, but it plays a similar-ish role. Now, what does help a lot is the mission presentation. These try to have really cinematic moments in a lot of missions, with these animated intros and outros to have cool moments or to show off an AC. These moments are somewhat contentious because they're really flashy, but they're great. They add so much needed momentum to the events of the game. Some of the animation work is a little stilted, but it's fine, this isn't a high-budget game. If every game had to have Call of Duty or Fortnite money to exist, the industry wouldn't exist. Now what is weird is the mission briefings have been simplified to an extreme degree. There's no voice acting, there's no direction of the text, it's a really boring presentation. For a couple of these, there is some graphic design that is pretty sick, but it's weirdly downgraded. Now, this is a stylistic choice, because there are briefings for missions on the second disc that are more traditional, but we'll get to that later. For now though, the main game's presentation is just strange. This is a pretty good spot to talk about the visuals, so let's cover that real quick. This game clearly got a massive overhaul in every way. Effects are redone, all the shaders are new, and the camera is pulled out so you can see more. Everything looks a lot better. Except for one major issue, which you've probably noticed by now. They've added this blur filter onto the entire image. Now, it can look okay on original hardware or on an old CRT, but if you're playing on anything that isn't a CRT, it's not gonna be a great look. Even its execution is a little scuffed. You can clearly tell where there are some seams in the filter, and it's pretty distracting. I got used to it, but it's still not great. I do like the visuals overall though, it's a really good looking PS2 game. Before we talk about what's happening in Nexus' story, we need to talk about the game's structure a little more. Because the game's a lot more deliberate in terms of selectable missions and being determined by wins and losses, FromSoft wanted players to stick to their losses, and not just to load a saved game. But how could they try and force this mentality? They came up with a solution that doesn't work very well. The save system has been changed so you can only save your info and not all of your data. You can only completely save your game when you select Quit Game. The game really tries to get you to save here, but you don't have to upon quitting. They also took out the ability to load your game unless you're at the main menu. I find this level of separation doesn't work well. I feel people who want perfect play in this game are just gonna save and quit after each mission rather than lose missions. A lot of people tend to optimize the fun out of their games, and this kind of change isn't great because of that. I don't know how else FromSoft could enforce this, but the solution isn't it. I think the only game that has a decent save mechanic is the original Resident Evils, but even then that can be poison to newcomers. I don't think these systems are great in general for that reason, but Nexus doesn't have a game over state, so it is kind of easy to ignore. Now, because the story is dynamic, the specific events aren't very specific until the mid to late game. The setting takes place 55 years after Silent Line, and has a lot of the same major players still kicking, with some newcomers. Mirage Remains has become a defined first place when it comes to influence and power. Even though this is the case, they constantly engage in shady behavior, getting every advantage they can get their hands on, being extremely aggressive. They tend to focus on boutique and sleek parts. Crest is still kicking, although not as important as they once were. They don't make a lot of public moves, but they're still plenty active. They make parts that are more rugged and standard. Navis is a new corporation who ballooned into importance when they discover a new vital resource and are really defensive in their tactics. Funnily enough, they don't make any AC parts. They do, however, discover evidence of a lost civilization in the mines they've been getting this resource from. Kisaragi is a tech powerhouse, but they only seem to be interested in the lost technology that Navis discovers. They tend to stay out of obvious battles. They make more obtuse and external parts. The Organization of Administration of Enterprise, or OAE, is a new organization that attempts to act as a peace mediator for businesses. They aren't a corporation, and they don't have parts associated with them. They try to appease everyone into non-aggression, but if they were at all successful, this game's events just wouldn't exist. They constantly try to act, but they are too afraid of causing extra conflict, so they don't have a ton of influence among the warmongering corporations. They'll give in to demands too often for their own good. As Navis essentially has a monopoly on this critical new resource, Mirage sees this as a threat, and war stems from there. As Navis tries to get help from other corporations, it doesn't work out, and each one decides to try and get whatever they can out of this war. This leads to a bunch of events happening, but it also leads to a pretty weak narrative throughline initially. This clash between Navis and Mirage doesn't really get interesting until like halfway through the game. Spoilers if you care, but I wouldn't worry about it too much. It kind of goes through the same motions as the previous games, with a couple of different aspects towards the end. In order to gain an upper hand in the conflict, Mirage starts to infiltrate the Raven's Ark to manipulate the happenings there. Crest pokes at Mirage's defenses, while Mirage is dealing with Navis, and in turn, Mirage limits Raven's options in terms of mission requests. They also oust Ravens who are partial to Crest. One of these is Evangel, and he disappears for the rest of the game. Ravens get splintered a bit, and if you do a lot of Crest missions, they will send you mail asking you to join them and to break off from the Raven's Ark. You can't do this, unfortunately. It becomes so blatant to the point that the only requests are from Mirage, to the point that a group of top-tier Ravens essentially dismantle the entirety of the Raven's Ark and replace them with new, unaffiliated personnel. Even your navigator is new. Unfortunately, neither navigator you had is named, so it feels pretty impersonal. This initiative is led by the top-ranked Raven, Jacko. This guy doesn't do much after this coup, but he becomes important later. While the OAE is initially very involved in this conflict trying to quell it, it never works out, and they end up not meaning much by the end of this series of engagements. Crest has issues with factions splintering off and trying to control more than they should, leading them to have crippling internal power struggles. Meanwhile, Kisaragi is facing a much more minor power struggle that leaves them in a state of disarray, but still functional. This leaves Mirage to continue their attacks on Navis unabated. Even with the Raven's Ark being cleared out of its corruption, Mirage and their efforts are too much for Navis, and they're wiped out. With Navis on their deathbed, they use some ancient technology that they discovered while getting this new resource. They lose control, and they send you in to destroy one of the massive MTs in a neat fight. Mirage takes control of these mines that had this new resource that Navis was using, only for them to lose their main force, and to stop the investigation into the region. Kisaragi has reason to believe that in Navis' dying acts, they activated more ancient technology. They sent in a team to the mine that most of the tech is located in, but they lost contact, and realized they don't have the means to control the tech. You are then given a mission to investigate and deactivate the control devices, to put a stop to these dangerous weapons before the Kisaragi team can activate them. You go in and destroy the control devices, but as you complete your objective, the system retaliates.
Intruder detected.
Destroy. Destroy.
Destroy.
Special weapon detected. Target destroyed.
What are those? We're too late. Enemy targets approaching. It may be too late. But we must stand and fight. It's our way. They're here.
Unable to analyze the target. Target. HP at 50%. Danger. HP at 10%.
This game ends in the player's death. You die. Because you were too late to catch the Kisaragi team and destroyed the control devices, the suicide drones ravaged the entirety of the planet's surface, causing another cataclysm. This was probably the force that sent humanity underground in Armored Core 3, an extremely destructive force that had laid dormant for eons, until reawakened by greedy corporations who thought to control it. This is explained more in Last Raven, as it is a direct sequel to this game, and we will cover it there. Just know that for now, by the end of this game's events, the Earth has been devastated. Just as a quick side note, the final boss unfortunately isn't actually Nineball. That is a translation change. In the Japanese version, it's just called Unknown. Kind of lame in comparison, but it is what it is. I personally dig the later events of Nexus, with the part of the Ravens arc being the absolute highlight of the game. The ending is great as well. It's a couple of cool story beats that use the game's presentation and mechanics to enhance its story. It's just a shame that the game doesn't do this more. Most of Nexus's story is corporations fighting amongst themselves, and most of it doesn't serve the finale or an overall message. It's a lot of corporate intrigue, which I personally don't find interesting and find not worth talking about. This game mostly focuses on how Corps will constantly try everything they can to get as much as they can. But it's pretty well tread ground by this point in the series, even if it is true. People might criticize this game due to the lack of detail, like, what even is the resource that Navis and Mirage are fighting for? Where did the OAE go? When I find those details don't matter to the overall story. It's just background detail that would have made the game more confusing, and I don't find value in criticizing the game over those details. If FromSoft didn't write about it, then the details were not worth telling. Rather, I think this game needed a stronger core to its story, something to tie all of its events together, like the Frighteners in AC2, the Controller in AC3, or the Silent Line in, well, Silent Line. The Ravens arc bit is pretty cool, and that part has a lot of intrigue, but all of the game's story doesn't serve to raise itself up. It's like the B-plot in other AC games took the place of an A-plot in Nexus. The post-game is a lot different from previous titles. Nexus is the first game in the series to have what is essentially a New Game Plus. When you beat the game, you're sent back to the beginning with all of your money, parts, and ranking points. This allows for the player to try and be more successful, to get different missions. You can only replay the missions that you have already played, so if you want to 100% the game, it's gonna take multiple playthroughs. There's more, however. There is an arena to play through. I'm not a huge fan of this implementation. There isn't any progression in this arena. You can fight each one at your leisure, but I like a goal to work towards. That's it for Disc 1, Armored Core Nexus Evolution. This is the bulk of the game's content, and the primary focus for Nexus. So you might be asking, what is Disc 2? Revolution is the game's second disc, and this primarily exists as extra content. Evolution is almost entirely made up of remade content from the original Armored Core trilogy on PS1, with some what-if scenarios thrown in there for good measure. The highlights from those games are taken and made with much more polish and pizzazz. Most of the cutscene presentation from the main game is here in these missions, and it makes them feel a lot more important and meaningful. A lot of the events of Project Phantasma and Master of Arena are connected to the corporations of Armored Core 1, making the events of those games feel connected when playing these missions. Having stuff like RNG Industries from Master of Arena being a subsidiary of Chrome from AC1 is great for building those games together. The characters for those games, like Valkyrie, Sumika, Stinger, and the Human Plus subjects all get so much more screen time and have great on-screen character. Seeing these characters again in its fidelity is so good if you've played the AC games on PS1. If you haven't played these games, however, it doesn't serve as a replacement because it doesn't cover all of the beats, and none of the final missions are in this disc. Still, it's pretty great fan service. I find it a lot better than the fan service in Another Age. Nexus is much more evolved than 2nd gen, so this feels a lot more warranted than Another Age. A couple of notes about these missions. You don't lose money here, but you don't gain any either. You can earn hidden parts in most of these missions, but you either need to find them or perform a hidden task, like getting more kills than your rival, or getting an S rank. I wouldn't recommend playing this before you beat the main game, because there are some missions that are really tough, and you can't make meaningful money from them. I'd play it as post-game content if you're gonna jump in. You can unlock other things, like concept art, intro movies, soundtracks, and emblems from previous games as well. It's not super useful nowadays when you can find this stuff online, but it's pretty cool regardless. While I do think they could have used the time they spent on this disc to make the main game a more fulfilling experience, I really enjoyed this content, so I can't complain too much. Speaking of the music you can unlock, this disc has a completely unique soundtrack that is composed of remixes of previous tracks in the series, and nearly all of them are amazing. They chose the best tracks from the series and took a spin on them, resulting in a fantastic soundtrack. This, in addition to the first disc's tracks, makes this one of my favorite video game OSTs of all time. Nothing but praise for almost all of these remixes. Have you done your daily listen of Apex and Circle Extended yet? The briefings here are the traditional briefings, with voice acting and details that you would expect from a traditional Armored Core game. It boggles the mind why they aren't like this in the main game. Regardless, a great disc of extra content. Seeing how they updated the old missions and new ones based on old premises was a joy. There are some really neat scenarios that had me grinning ear to ear. The second disc also allows for 2 people to play System Link with one set of the game, and they also added LAN support for Nexus. This makes System Link much more accessible, so if you have a buddy or 3 that want to go at it, it's much easier to do that in Nexus than it is with other games on the PS2. The performance is nice, and it has plenty of options, but some... My PS2 stopped reading the disc. Luckily I have a backup PS2. There aren't any new super weapons to this game, but they did modify the Kurosawa to be much worse. They added a left-handed variant, so you could theoretically dual-wield them, but building around that weight and energy demand isn't really feasible. Looks sick as hell though. Nexus, for all of its changes to appease to a wider market, didn't really make a splash when it comes to appealing to said market. While remaking all the visuals, the new slick presentation, and the new controls did work to make the game more appealing on the surface, the actual package does the opposite, and it's much more complicated and finicky. I can't imagine trying to play this game and trying to come to grips with all of the parts, only to be hit with heat, bad resale on parts, initially boring story, and tough AC opponents. Armored Core, before 6, never reviewed well critically, and Nexus is no exception. Nexus was an attempt to turn that around, to stop being extremely iterative, but unfortunately contradicts itself, leading to a divisive and messy game. It's technically more playable and accessible, but the actual content doesn't have those same goals. I love parts of it to death, but it never comes together to create something great. It's a fractured experience, ironically only recommendable to people who already like the series. Armored Core Last Raven is a dark, mean, and depressing game. Just look at the desolation and how far it reaches. Look at the desperation of everyone working, trying to get everything working before this enemy AC comes in. Watch the lethality on display, how they're fighting for nothing. Nothing survives when ravens clash. They leave nothing of value behind, just wreckage and bodies of things that used to live. What a fantastic intro. It sets the tone, sells its brutality, and has fantastic camera work. Now, you might know Last Raven is one of the first games that Hidetaka Miyazaki worked on at From Software, who worked as a planner on this title. You might also know the game because of other reasons. Do you think From Software's later works are tough? Time to meet your maker, buddy.
This can't be!
This is easily one of the most difficult games that From Software has ever made, if not the most difficult. We'll get into why later, but let's get the basics down before we get into details. The game can begin with either a new game or transferring a file from Nexus or Ninebreaker, just don't worry about that one though. And we're treated to another CG cutscene detailing the premise of the game. After the events of Nexus, humanity was decimated. As a result, what remained of the corporations fused and became a super corporation, Alliance. Alliance's initial goals are to rebuild after those Nexus events, and after a few months, some decent progress has been made. Because Alliance is made up of former remnants of greedy corps who brought about this devastation, a lot of Ravens don't trust them, and form Vertex. Led by Jacko, they oppose Alliance in everything they stand for, and aim to destroy them once and for all, and to free humanity from their oppressive yoke. After a bit of a struggle, Vertex makes a statement. War will commence in 24 hours, and they will initiate their final attack to destroy Alliance once and for all. This game is about those 24 hours, and who you decide to ally yourself with and who you fight will change the course of this conflict. There are plenty of complications with this war. While Alliance has a lot of territory control and has a large army and resources, a ton of Ravens have sided with Vertex. Multiple Ravens have been killed by this point, but a few remaining ones have become independent warlords. Some members of Alliance are still acting as Kisaragi and conducting experiments. It's a pretty complicated story by Armored Core standards, but there are some characters here to ground the actions that happen. Jacko is a returning character from Nexus, who is elevated in this game as one of major importance. The leader of Vertex, he is the face of the group and hates Alliance with a passion. He's definitely an enigmatic character. Most of Vertex don't even know what he's up to. Evangel is another character who returns from Nexus, your rival from that game. A former Crest lifer, he is one who sides with Alliance and is their self-proclaimed greatest Raven. He's obsessed with finding who he calls dominance. Ravens who he deems the best, ones who can change the course of history. Zenaida is a new Raven, who's shrouded in mystery. While she doesn't care for who wins the current conflict and doesn't like people who pick sides, she picks a lot of fights and has built up quite a list of people who want her dead. There are other Ravens that show up in missions, and while some have distinct personalities, most are pretty simple. So, the structure of this game is kind of similar to other AC games, but it's more specific this time around. Every mission you do, either 1 or 2 hours will pass, and the other options for missions will disappear. Considering the game ends after 24 hours, each playthrough is pretty short. If you're good enough and know what you're doing, you can complete a playthrough in an hour and a half. My shortest playthrough was an hour, but do not expect that to be the average playthrough. A usual run will have a lot of failed missions, and will always result in a game over, which will put you back to the menu before you accepted the mission. You can also reset your run if you get stuck on an insane level. If you get stuck on a particular mission, you can usually just accept a different one, so there are some options if you get stuck. The ethos of this game is the complete opposite of Nexus. Whereas that game wanted you to live with your mistakes, Last Raven tells you, no, beat the mission. It's a stark contrast, and while on paper I think Nexus being dynamic with failure is interesting, Last Raven having you retry missions is more realistic to how people play games. People want to overcome the challenges they choose. Part of this challenge comes from the customization. Part balance in terms of heat restrictions has thankfully been toned down, so more parts are compatible with each other. That isn't really the case with weapon balance though. Nexus wasn't extreme from what I found, so the weapon balance in that game wasn't that big of an issue. When Last Raven cranks up everything, it limits what weapons are viable even more. Most back weapons I found are straight up unviable. So many enemies are fast and will just floss on you. Speed is king in this game. You need to keep distance and move fast enough to dodge gunfire and missiles. This in turn leads to heavy equipment not being great. Your speed is limited by your weight, remember. The purge mechanic becomes absolutely essential here. You need all the speed you can get. You're gonna need all the ammunition you can get a hold of as well. Enemies can take a while to destroy, and there are some missions where you fight a ton of enemies. Some can even dodge pretty well, and others are just super tiny. Listen up, let me tell you the good stuff. For any enemy that is an AC or larger than one, use micro missiles and missile extensions. Because they can't intercept all of the missiles in a burst, damage will always go through. The bigger the enemy, the easier it is to hit them. It becomes invaluable, incredible burst damage. For hand weapons, you have a few options. The Shade laser rifle, paired with the Gaia core, can have some great consistent results if your energy is stable. It's got decent ammunition, great damage, and good range. Pixie 3 is the best option for a machine gun, and it's an initial cheap buy. A ton of ammo, decent damage if you can get close, and extremely light for its value, great for aggressive play. Most sniper rifles are great mid to long range, and they pack a decent punch if you can track your enemies well. The linear rifles also have a decent fire rate with decent firepower, but they are heavy. Handguns are great for backup if you have a storage option, and I needed them on countless missions. You can store blades as well, but I found blades only essential in one single mission in the game, and that was to conserve ammo with my then current build. They aren't great damage wise, and conflicts with a new issue unique to Last Raven. When enemies die, there is now a new burst of damage that happens as they explode. This means if you blade an enemy to death and they explode, you might take a ton of damage. This sucks! It's a hard nerf to blades, not to mention in cramped spaces, you just have to stand there and wait for them to explode before proceeding. Sometimes this can happen late too, like look at this! There are a few other changes to the core design that kind of upset me as well. Enemies are often placed in corridors that require really fast reaction timing or you take bad damage. Some of these missions have time limits, and it can be stressful dealing with all of these MTs that can get in the way and do decent damage against you. When you do poorly in a mission, your AC can have a body part explode and be crushed. You have to replace it via buying a replacement. This might look cool and be more realistic, but it's very punishing if you do badly in a mission and are lacking in funds. There is a deeper issue though, and it has to do with the more extreme AC fights. So Armored Core 1st and 2nd Gen had Human Plus, an enhancement mechanic that allows pilots to surpass limits, like shooting a back-mounted grenade launcher while moving. Armored Core 3 and Silentline had a replacement for this, which was OP Intensify, which allowed a lot more abilities via replaying missions after the game was beaten. Nexus and Last Raven do not have accessible enhancement mechanics like Human Plus or OP Intensify, which while I'm initially not soured by this, it becomes an issue when all of the tough AC fights have access to these abilities. Now, in Nexus, this wasn't a big deal, considering that game's difficulty isn't off the rails, and they did give things like the Blade Wave to the player. In Last Raven, however, it's so much more insane. So many pilots use these abilities, and it can feel unfair sometimes. Some pilot fights are so crazy in this game, you need to have your build completely optimized for some of these fights. You then need to execute, and some areas you fight in are also restrictive. It's so insane. When you just see an enemy AC shoot their grenade launcher at you while flying in the air going super fast, it feels like they're cheating, because they are. This is where the core difficulty comes from. The AC fights are incredibly tight and demanding. If you don't know these systems and controls inside and out, you will get torn apart. Now, this game sounds terrible, right? Cheating ACs, exploding parts, limited part viability, short playtimes? Who'd want to play this kind of game? It sounds straight up evil. Let me tell you why this game actually owns. Presentation-wise, this is easily the best of any Armored Core game up until this point. The blur filter that was in Nexus has been fixed and toned down, so you get back a lot of detail. The new AC explosions are great looking, if a bit violent when paired with its voice acting.
No!
Enemy AC destroyed.
Mission accomplished.
The beginning of each mission has a quick AC boot-up sequence that is just so sick! This is good, as it is essentially a known start, so you don't have those moments where you're blindsided right at the start of a mission, like in Nexus for example. It lets whoever is playing know exactly when gameplay starts, a really smart decision. The cutscene direction also adds so much more to the experience. They almost always reserve it for mission targets, panning shots of the mission so you know what the terrain is like, and most importantly, showcasing the other Raven. It gives these missions so much more personality. A lot of the missions feel distinct just because of the cutscene you're given before, during, or after the mission. The emblems that the organizations and Ravens use are now animated as well, with their own sound. It's a small change, but it makes everything so much more sleek. The visual presentation is just fantastic. The audio is also pretty strong. I found the voice acting much more common in this game, and most of it is pretty decent.
Now it's time for you to face a real foe. This isn't happening. You killed my comrade. Your life is forfeit.
You still get a decent amount of dry dialogue as per usual, but most of it helps define these characters. The AC computer surprisingly has a lot of advice that acts as decent info if you're listening in, and it doesn't take up subtitle space. Every enemy AC also has a decent amount of voice work. Nearly every single one has 2 lines for losing momentum in the fight, and 2 for gaining momentum in combat.
Cool, what a bloody mess. I guess it's up to me now. Many like you have tried to best me, but all failed. Well, I see you have some fight left in you. That's cool. Now you're good, Raven, but not as good as I. I can't die. I die.
Most have more than that. Ravens will even have different lines if you fight them in a different mission. The music is also just insane. It mixes so many different conventions to make something that isn't super listenable outside of the game, but incredibly fitting. They use all kinds of instruments in these tracks that are just off the wall. Like, what is a dentist drill in there? Like, huh? Wild OST. Just try to listen to it on speakers rather than headphones. Some tracks are a little shrill. I think the mission diversity in this game is pretty fantastic, with there being 74 missions. 74 or 76, it's weird. It's pretty shocking how different they all are from each other. While a lot do boil down to an AC fight, the context and composition of each matter, and it changes a ton. A lot of the ACs fight differently from each other, and a lot of the time they have their own MTs as backup. It can create some interesting encounters. MTs are also a bit stronger than most titles. Some take a bit of damage, and their composition matters as well. Some are mixed in with others that can create cool scenarios to fight against themselves, and this is great for keeping things fun to play through. Aww, there are even little groups of humans! The MTs are not pushovers, and they can be pretty dangerous if you're not prepared. It helps make each mission memorable. I was so shocked to see so many of these missions I remembered. It's pretty great stuff. While the difficulty can get cheap sometimes, the high level of challenge really sells these events as desperate and lethal. It instills this deep feeling that your survival is in danger at every moment and that you have to give it your all. Personally, it's really enthralling. I do think every once in a while, the game goes too far to become frustrating, but for most of the experience, the toughness and roughness works. I originally played this game back in April earlier this year, and this most recent playthrough made me really appreciate this game when I already knew this game's tricks. What this game does well is giving you every single story detail that you could ever want. You can check up on details of every mission, every enemy, every piece of jargon. It's all in the world report. This rules so hard. If you missed out on details or you're lost, you can check this to catch up. It's basically just a codex. There is a more important menu though. Anytime in a playthrough, you can check a Raven's list, so you can see Ravens that are still alive, and it will mark when someone is killed or missing. If you encounter them and take them out, you will get an extra reward in a bounty. Each Raven has a different bounty depending on how important or dangerous they are, so you can kind of gauge who is important through this screen. In so many missions, you will encounter Ravens that are after you or doing their own mission, and it feels dynamic and natural. You will also get details from your advisor, Ed, and he gives you his perspective on each Raven. He gives his insight and info on every briefing, every mission result, and other things. He generally has pretty good details, and has his own flavor of text where his personality shines through. He's generally pretty skeptical, and trusts in you to get the job done. He has some funny lines too, and he'll straight up mock Alliance for being untrustworthy. He definitely isn't afraid to speak his mind. He'll stick with you no matter what path you take. His loyalty to the player is unshakable. The arena is back after being missing from Nexus, and it's pretty different than normal. It's now a VR arena, and all of these pilots are different from the Ravens in the story. Some are just straight up the flagships from previous games as arena pilots. It's a pretty good excuse to bring these parts and designs back. Like, even the Project Phantasma guy's back. Like, what? So cool. This kind of fan service isn't obtrusive, so it's just a bonus. You do have to put in a bet to win a pop bonus, so it can be a little annoying, but you can just reload if you don't like to lose money. They do open up the tuning to all eligible parts to be free and changeable, and that opens up tinkering to be more freeing. The menu navigation is fast and responsive, and that really helps in changing out parts. The game also gives you more overall details on how good your AC is right in the customization screen, so it's easier to tell what is good. There's also an important stat they display. It's your maximum boost speed. Good for, well, telling you your boost speed. Removing obfuscation is always a good thing. The speed in this game makes it feel so much more active. I really like the AC combat in this game. While it does limit build variety, it limits it to what I like to play. I don't think it's as successful of a shift in gameplay styles as Bloodborne is to Dark Souls, but it's kind of similar. No, that comes later. While limiting the variable playstyles is legitimately a bad thing, I find the game turning into a fast action game kind of interesting to see. It also helps that the game just feels tighter and more precise to control. It feels really good and satisfying to go fast. The branching paths that this game has are pretty complicated, and to get the more tough ones, you usually have to meet some specific conditions. I would recommend this guide on GameFAQs after your first playthrough if you want to do everything. It's overly detailed and saved my bacon more times than I can count. I'll leave a link to it in the description. While making some missions hard to get may seem annoying on the surface, this is actually really important. The insane routes are restricted by having to do the tough missions. This means when you are still getting to grips with the game or don't have great parts yet, you can avoid the evil missions of the game. Most of the early game always offers plenty of variety, so if you get to a mission with an AC that is a little crazy, you can either try it as many times as you want to beat it, or you can just dip and do another mission. As a result, unless if you deliberately follow that guide and choose a more difficult path, you're not going to land on a crazy one by accident. It's honestly more reasonable than you might expect. You can end up on paths that are honestly pretty fine, with only 2 or 3 tough fights at the end of the game, which will always be there. While you don't always get great endings on these easy playthroughs, I found this would encourage me to see what else was in this game to understand the full picture. One path is never going to give you the whole story, so playing through this game multiple times to get a few endings is definitely recommended. There are clear winners and losers for endings, but there's some gold in there too. For the record, if, and this is a big if, you know what you're doing, it isn't necessary to bring in a file from Nexus. If you start with a fresh save, the game gives you a ton of money to toy around with. If you replace the internals with a combo like Birdie, G91, and the R76, then get a couple of better weapons like the Pixie 3, the WL8852, or a longer range option if you want, and a nymph paired with the E73RM, then you're basically set. Just remember to get some better body parts later and some better rifles later down the line. You're basically set for a lot of the early game. This game gives you plenty of cash, so it's slightly feasible if you know what you're doing. There is one other thing I want to talk about before I spoil this game a ton. I talked about Ed already, but the navigator you have in this game is a bit more active in speech, that being Shyla. She talks a lot and is constantly giving you info mid-mission. I found her voice acting to be a bit better than the older AC games.
The targets appear to travel underground. Hold your fire until they surface. It's all over if any more of the Allied MTs are lost.
She's really similar to navigators of previous games, but with her and Ed, they make this team that has your back. It's kinda sick. Usually in other games, it's your contact who is part of a bigger organization, but here it's your personal team. Super cool contextually, again the opposite of Nexus, where in that game the Raven's Arc experience felt lonely. Now, whether or not you want this game spoiled is up to you. I recognize that this game is daunting and freaky, and it isn't easy to get a hold of, so if you want to experience this game via this video, then by all means, but if you want to dive into hell, then dip for this next chapter. Spoilers ahead. So this game has 6 endings, each covering different aspects or characters in this conflict. The routes are Jacko, Evangel, Leviathan, Zenaida, and Pulverizer 1 and 2. There are a few events which are consistent in every playthrough. Evangel in every playthrough will switch sides to Vertex. This usually breaks down towards the end of the conflict, as Evangel either gets killed, turns back to Alliance, or just goes missing. Zenaida will almost always show interest in the player, and usually expresses disappointment in them when they choose a side. Most of the independent warlords will side with Vertex to show that they can be useful and to show their disdain for Alliance. There are always Kisaragi loyalists who continue to work on their bioweapon research, which Alliance will sometimes resort to in specific strikes. Alliance will always inform all remaining Ravens of weapons called the Pulverizers and will blame Vertex. Vertex denies this, but claims that they are dangerous regardless. The game nearly always ends in Cirque City, Vertex's main stronghold, and it's a pretty important location for reasons we'll get to later. The Jacko and Evangel routes are the most simple ones, so we'll cover those first. Jacko's route has you side with Alliance to defend against Vertex, and it's a pretty standard route. You do a lot of defense missions, defending supply routes, protecting convoys, and other things to impede Vertex's assault. You don't get a lot of details about the conflict, purposefully so. Alliance keeps you in the dark and doesn't want you to know what you're fighting for. This all ends with a fight with Jacko to end Vertex.
You're too late. The mission's already done. She took care of it. Everything's gone according to my plans. There's just one thing left. I want to be remembered, so the world will know I was a
have to come down to this? Let's head back.
Shyla expressing frustration about the results of this conflict stems from this conflict being seemingly pointless. It's kind of funny for a game's ending to say, well, that sucked. Evangel's route gleans more detail out of the conflict. This playthrough has you teaming with Vertex, with Jacko being pretty involved in judging your missions and the results of said missions. You'll get some personal emails from Evangel, who's on the side of Vertex at these moments. He threatens you and calls you a dominant, and that you won't steal his spotlight. Dominants are something that Evangel has become obsessed with. It's essentially whoever he deems is the best Raven, and is unbeatable. His quest to kill others who could be a dominant is his ultimate goal, and it rules his every waking thought. Being an excellent pilot is how he values his self-worth, and you existing upsets him, and it becomes an ego problem. He believes some people are just naturally dominants, and that some are destined to be the best. While it isn't stated, I believe this stems from the events of Nexus. He was the player's rival in Nexus, and when the player in that game dies, it leaves him with an unfinished rivalry. He'll never know if he was better than the Nexus protagonist. It's a thirst he'll never quench. I believe this drives him to find someone else to fill that void, to find a release and prove that he was the best all along. Jacko has you dealing with a lot of Ravens in this route, from Alliance mainly, but also from Vertex. The Vertex Ravens you take out are ones that Jacko says are traitors, but it's pretty clear that they aren't.
You betrayed us. That can't be forgiven.
It's so odd. He made it sound like you were the traitor.
You might even see a pulverizer, mysterious weapons of mass destruction. While it isn't guaranteed in this route, it can happen. You get a warning from Jacko that a weapon manufacturing facility was found underneath Cirque City. It creates autonomous weapons, and that the world is facing total destruction. He clarifies that the conflict was to narrow down the field, and it's time to find out who is the one. The whole point was to find out who's the best of the best, and to use them to stop this weapons facility, known later as the Internecine. Evangel hates that Jacko chooses you, and cannot accept the idea that the player is a dominant. The final mission is Evangel breaking into Cirque City, and you being tasked by Vertex to take him out.
What are you doing here? This is no place for an ordinary Raven. I'm a dominant. This is my job. You don't get it, do you? I guess there's only one way to help you understand, then.
He did betray us.
I can't be losing. How can this be? It's ironic, isn't it? I turned out to be the weaker one. Head in. I'll take care of things here. The rest is up to you now. Don't fail, Raven.
Let's go find out what awaits us. This must be what Evangel was trying to reach. It's huge. There's no time to waste. Destroy them all. That did it. Shutdown confirmed. We have to believe it's over. I hope the world is finally safe.
While this ending doesn't answer a lot of mysteries, it provides a lot of details on Evangel, and you do deal with the actual conflict. It's a decent ending and route. The Leviathan route is kind of similar to Evangel's route, with you teaming up with Vertex, but you are fighting against Alliance's primary army in addition to their force of Ravens. This really shows how large the Alliance force is, and they seem never ending. Expect to fight a lot of MTs and defend a lot of Vertex's interests. In the middle of this, you just get thrown into a duel with Evangel by Jacko. This is even before Evangel had revealed that he was still working for Alliance, so Jacko was either really lucky in his tactic of finding the best Raven, or saw through Evangel's facade.
Watch closely, Jack. I'll show you your powers. How is it possible? Nobody's this good.
You won!
Because you kill Evangel early in the conflict, Alliance has to resort to their backup plan. They have their own super weapon, a flying MT called the Leviathan, completed from its form by Navis in Nexus. It's equipped with multiple weapons, it's really fast, and has a lot of armor. Luckily, it's pretty large and can't dodge, so use micro missiles to just waste it. The final mission ends with you destroying the main force of Alliance, and lasts for a long time. It ends with a fight with 3 Leviathans, a grueling fight.
What are those things? Be careful. They're moving in to attack.
Special weapon destroyed.
There's another. Get ready. The target is inbound.
Powerful energy signature.
It's finished. I wonder if peace will finally be restored. Let's head back.
While this ending isn't great, it's better than the Jacko route. It is one of the only endings that doesn't end in Cirque City, funnily enough, so that makes it unique, I guess. There are 2 Pulverizer routes, one being much more accessible and the other really answering most of the mysteries that the game holds. Let's cover the easier one first. Pulverizer 1 is a pretty common route. You don't really have to choose either side. You can do a mix of missions, but you do fall on the side of Alliance. It's a pretty standard route until...
Is that a pulverizer? It looks dangerous. Be careful.
After this encounter, Zenaida mails you to say that she's incredibly disappointed in the fact that you chose Alliance, and that Evangel didn't stand a chance against her, that he was a coward. Evangel sends you this deranged mail. Just look at this. He is long gone, but what's this about power that evolves indefinitely? Alliance tells you that a dangerous force has emerged from Cirque City, and that they believe it's Vertex's final gambit. It isn't, but they don't know better. The penultimate mission has you dealing with Vertex's second in command and...
Area has been raised. There's the target. Take him out.
Yeah, the suicide drones from Nexus that caused another near-extinction event are still around, and are connected to the internecine underneath Cirque City. They cleared Vertex out of Cirque City, but don't have a ton of forces left, and want you to go in and investigate.
Raven, my scanner is picking up a lot of activity. Do what you can to avoid being hit. They just keep coming. What can I do? It can't end like this.
Raven, over here.
The gate is unlocked. Get out of there. What are you waiting for? Get moving! Jack?
Look at me. This is what happens when you step over the line. It was foolish to think we could control it. You're the only hope now, Raven. You must not fail.
It's time. This is it. I don't know what lies ahead, Raven. Please be careful. This must be what Jack was talking about. Something's wrong here, Raven. Keep your distance and stay alert.
Interesting.
I thought so. Someone's on board that thing.
You're one as well. A dominant.
You did it. I'm glad you're okay. Let's head out.
So, at some point Vertex, in a show of desperation, found a way to deactivate a pulverizer and let Evangel take control, who went after anyone and everyone. Jacko mentioning that it was foolish to think that they could contain it is pretty interesting, because in nearly every other ending, he is in fear of the pulverizers and wants them destroyed. Perhaps his original goal was to control the pulverizers, and when he saw their might, he panicked and wanted them destroyed? It does seem like Jacko is judging Ravens throughout the entire 24-hour time span. Maybe this is searching for the right pilot initially? Then when he sees their almighty power, he wants instead to destroy them? I'm willing to bet that he convinces Evangel to switch sides out of an offer to control a pulverizer, considering Evangel's lust for power. And when Evangel sees that Jacko cowards out in the other routes, he revolts back to Alliance. Considering Zenaida says that Evangel is a coward, I'm willing to bet that she got offered the same thing and declined, and saw that Evangel took it in a heartbeat, then rightfully judged him for it. This ending adds a lot of interesting details to the game, a pretty great route. Pulverizer 2 is one of the 2 routes that has an insane difficulty spike and is one of 2 possible true endings. People tend to say this because this and the last one have unique credit scenes, and I tend to agree due to another detail that I'll get to later. Anyway, you ally yourself with Vertex this time, and most of the missions you have to accept to get this route frequently involve a Raven fight, in some instances too. You also aid a lot of independent warlords against Alliance. Alliance mails you like, "Oh, don't help them, come on." Around halfway through the route, you get a mail from Jacko saying it's impossible at present time to destroy a pulverizer, but his plan will not change, and that one of the Ravens among those alive has the strength he seeks. You then deal with some Alliance goons when...
A pulverizer.
You'll lose if you attack.
You have to attack. The situation demands it. Take it down.
Identify target destroyed.
You did it!
You destroyed it. Maybe that can be stopped.
You get an email from Jacko after this mission. He says, I assume neither side will secure total victory, but I'm not concerned about the outcome. And that all the fighting has been leading to the final stages of his plan. You go in to defend the main area of Cirque City, and you fight another pulverizer. Alliance after this fight is finished, and Vertex's main force is also destroyed. All that remains are the pulverizers, and Jacko is your only lead. The only two Ravens left by this point are Jacko and Zenaida. Zenaida lets you know that the pulverizers are weapons that can evolve after every battle, and worries that they'll become invincible. Jacko tells you that the world is facing destruction once again, and tells you that there won't be many chances to finish off this menace. The pulverizers are weapons that gather combat data from their fights and transmit their data to the internecine to create a new variant that has learned, becoming exponentially more deadly. The only way to destroy them is to destroy the internecine. Jacko sends you and Zenaida to help him destroy the internecine once and for all. This is a tag team effort, one dealing with roaming, aimless pulverizers, while the other focuses on destroying the internecine. You're gonna need a lot of ammo because you face a pulverizer right off the bat, and this one is really tough due to it being able to fly really fast.
Jack! I don't believe what I'm seeing.
Main system. Engaging combat mode.
You have to destroy it, Raven. Good job, Raven. Let's go check on the other target. The facility seems to be offline. There's another AC. Ah! What is that? This isn't happening. Run! It's another pulverizer. How is that possible? The internecine has been stopped.
This thing is tough, but most of its attacks are reliably dodgeable, so you can learn the fight. Just be sure to have plenty of ammo.
You finished it. So many Ravens were lost, though. You did well. Let's head back.
So one thing to consider about the pulverizers is that the suicide drones in them are both made from the internecine, but were meant to be controlled from the control device that was destroyed at the end of Nexus. The internecine is just thrown into overdrive, a force that sent humanity underground, now out of control, set to unleash its destruction to all. The original manipulators have been long gone, sitting dormant, but now the system is unleashed to roam free but with no will, drawn to conflict simply to fulfill its purpose, making it potentially more dangerous than someone with an agenda. This aspect isn't really brought up in game, but it's really important to consider when the actions of the pulverizers don't make tactical sense or logical sense. What we can gather is that Jacko probably wanted to control the pulverizers out of fear rather than killing them over and over. He is so afraid of the pulverizers that he doesn't want them to learn, so instead he wants to control them. Now, he becomes super afraid of combating the pulverizers because he knows if that ravens kept killing them, they would eventually become too powerful for anyone else. His plan of whittling down ravens to craft the ultimate raven is flawed. The conflict brought out the pulverizers, and they would learn from the fights that were brought about, and ultimately brings his plans to ruin. His ethos of crafting the ultimate warrior through trial by fire only barely works, but at the cost of every other raven. This is a pretty great route. You truly become the last raven. Considering the fact that that's the title of the game, I'd consider that fact that you are the last one standing to be part of the game's conceit, so it makes sense that it's a canon ending. But hold on, what's that blue pulverizer at the end of the credits? Before we go into that, we have one more route to go through. While both pulverizer routes are great, and 2 is one of the true endings, there remains one thing.
Where's Zenaida?
This route easily features the most AC fights out of any other route in the game. You churn through so many other ravens, and it's tough to put it lightly. This is where the Legends of Last Raven's difficulty comes from, and where fans are separated from masochists. While I don't usually like hard games for the sake of being hard, I've beaten this route twice, so there's probably something wrong with me. You don't really take a side to the conflict of this route, you mainly just take any mission that will result in a raven fight. Zenaida constantly tries to challenge you, first being interrupted by an independent warlord. You fight that first pulverizer from the previous route, and you're asked by Jacko to take out Zenaida.
Main system. Engaging combat mode.
You may both engage when ready. Let's find out which one of you is the real deal.
We meet again, Raven. Something's approaching.
How could another be created so fast? Stop fighting and pull back. That thing's too strong to beat.
Warning. AP at 50%.
What is that thing? Interrupted again. Oh well, orders are orders.
Afterwards, you get a mail from Zenaida where she remarks that you're super good and she won't forget you. She then says that the pulverizer you two encountered was different than the last one and remarks that there may be different types. You fight that second pulverizer fight from the last route, which marks 3 of them so far. You get a unique mail from Zenaida, who remarks how the conflict is beginning to conclude, but if both keep going at each other, they'll be There'll be a delicious pulverizer snack. She says that they should focus on the threat of the pulverizers rather than fighting. Sensible! Unlike Jacko, who asks you to deal with some alliance scraps.
Their true strength can't be gauged from this. They'll have to face me. Let's see if they're worthy of carrying the last Raven title.
Game?
My first impression of you was right. But there's still something that needs to be done. We must hurry.
Jacko vanishes, and Vertex mails you, wondering what his plan even was. They're super lost, but remain devoted. Jacko mails you, briefs you on the internecine, and takes Evangel's lingo, saying that you might be a dominant. But before that, Vertex wants you to stop Alliance's final attempt of an attack.
You did it. What is it we're fighting for? Sometimes I wonder if there's a purpose to all of this.
Zenaida mails you before the final battle, commenting how you and her are the only ones who can both destroy the internecine and pulverizers at the same time, and they need to be stopped before they can become invincible. You seem to go in from the entrance that Zenaida went through in the last row, like you two have traded places. This is the beginning.
Please advance with care.
This tunnel is honestly terrible, but eventually it can be learned if you have the time to learn it.
Incredible. This must be the internecine. It's huge. Those devices on the wall. I think they're power sources. There's no time to waste. Destroy them all.
One target remaining.
That did it. Shutdown confirmed. Good work. Let's head out. Look over there. It's an AC. I had a feeling we'd meet again. I've always wondered what it is that sets certain ravens apart from others. Maybe I'll find out. Once I've gotten rid of you. You have to fight her, Raven.
Enemy HP detected. Warning.
It's not over yet.
This is the hardest boss in any From Software game that they have ever put out, bar none. No competition. I haven't played every video game, and I don't go out of my way to play the hardest games ever made, but personally, this is the hardest boss I've ever fought. I realize this sounds hyperbolic. I recognize that this sounds insane, but hear me out. It's because she cheats in every way possible. Let's list all the stuff the Fascinator, Zenaida's AC, has changed and improved. She now carries the Python, the new showcase weapon for the game, which is a single-handed railgun on the right arm. She also carries the Nyx machine gun on the left hand, which is the fastest firing machine gun in the game, able to spit out damage really fast at close range. She's got a rapid-fire pulse cannon on her back, which of course she can use whenever she wants. She has dual missiles as well. This loadout means she can be effective at almost all ranges, but best at close range. All of her parts that can be tuned have maxed out tuning in all categories. You can't have a better machine than her. Her legs have a much increased turning function and have a speed spike ability where she can have a free boost of speed. You'll never escape her. Her FCS has increased missile lock-on speed and increased lockbox size and range. You'll never leave her sights. Her generator has infinite energy capacity. I'm gonna say this again. Her generator has infinite energy capacity. You can never outpace her. All of her weapons have increased accuracy, attack power, attack heat, reload time, and stun, with tighter missile spread and no mag reload on her internal handgun. You'll never outgun her. She has all optional parts equipped. You'll never out-equip her. Not to mention, she's much more aggressive and has faster reaction times than anyone in the game. How do you beat a monster like this? How can you best someone who has every advantage they can possibly have? Simple. You outplay her. Huh, easier said than done. Now, there is some build advice that I might offer here. First is that you have to have a really fast AC that is above at least 420 kilometers an hour, or else she will just outmaneuver you and run laps around you. You need something that's fast enough to dodge her Python as well, and you can hear it rev up, and that'll give you some time to do some movement that will make her miss. If you're using micro missiles, don't use them over and over, as she will try to close in to dodge your missiles. So use these if you want, but use them sparingly. Machine guns can work. You need to be able to aim extremely well in order to be effective. It's not a reliable option for me personally, but I used a machine gun, a linear rifle, and 2 handguns, and was only able to just beat her. Now, another point of major importance, you have to go through that suicide drone area with minimal damage taken, because you retain that damage taken when you go into the second section. You also have to destroy the internecine before you fight Zenaida, which takes up precious ammo. What I found works best is to take in the cheapest rockets I can find and equip them. Even if it makes me overweight, I would then use that to destroy the internecine and ditch it before the fight with Zenaida starts. That way I'm not overweight anymore. There was no way I was going to be able to hit Zenaida with those dinky rockets, so they were better off my AC so I can be faster. Now thankfully, there is a checkpoint between the suicide drone tunnel and the internecine, so you only need to do it once if you go in with the right build. It took me 52 tries to beat Zenaida, and that was with knowing her tricks and having a personalized game plan. If I hadn't already played this game earlier this year, I straight up don't know if I could have done this video, at least with my hard drive space intact. Again, that guide for the routes has lots of details if you want other ideas, so use that if you think torture is good for you. If you have enough skill, have your perfect build, knowledge, and an infinite amount of patience.
Sure. AP at 10%.
I worked tirelessly to become what I am. I thought being the best would justify my existence. Things are never that simple, though. Raven, it's you who deserves the title. It's finished. She was right about things never being simple. None of the choices we make ever are. We're done here. Let's head out.
Ravens, an elite group of mercenaries. These individuals carry out assignments for the highest bidder in their mechanized, armored core war machines. In a world where individual freedom is constrained by those in power, these fierce warriors answer only to themselves. An obituary for the idea and concept of Ravens in the series. This was the last time any Armored Core game called the group of AC mercenaries Ravens. While the term would come back a couple more times as some cool fanservice and moments in AC6 specifically, this was a farewell to the larger concept. What a better way to send off the era of Ravens by defining what they stood for. A fitting end to Gen 3, and Last Raven was the final game in the old style. So this moment kind of gets to me. Knowing that no other game will come back to this style, knowing that there's no going back. But it was a good run, ending on a love letter to fans. Even if it's kind of twisted, Armored Core stays true to its convictions, its disdain for those who perpetuate violence and those in power, and never stopping for the sake of the system it's forced to exist in. It's extremely admirable. Zenaida's stance on power stems from effort and dedication. You have to earn power, you have to train and cultivate it. Consider the fact that her AC build is one that has a playstyle that has a high skill ceiling, so her AC reflects her mentality. It's just so weird and ironic that FromSoft made her final AC essentially one that cheats. It runs counter to her character. This puts her in counter to Jacko and Evangel, where the former believes that survival of the fittest creates the strong, and the latter holds the belief of natural strength. In reality, it's a multitude of factors that results in Ravens being strong, and not one simple answer, as Zenaida realizes in the end. The kind of people that this war-torn world bred are ones obsessed with violence and strength, and it's pretty depressing. They can't live normal lives when conflict controls their every waking moment, and it dominates their character. It's complicated, cause in the case of Zenaida and Jacko, they both clearly want freedom from corporations, but they don't necessarily want peace. Jacko is willing to throw away people's lives away for nothing, and Zenaida's always itching to kill people to further her own skill. Evangel is just driven mad by his only rival dying in Nexus, and he just wants to quench that craving for the sake of his own ego. Unfortunately, those three in addition to Alliance result in massive destruction, and the end of Ravens, leaving you the last one standing. This ending is probably my favorite. The final shot just lingers on and on and on, really selling how sad and lonely the world is now, with the era of Ravens being over. What's left of the world is saved, but at an incredible cost. It's depressing to see the desolation after the hopefulness of Armored Core 3's ending, with humanity finally being free to choose for themselves, only for the sins of the past to creep up, to be unleashed by the greed of corporations. While hope for a better future exists with Alliance and Vertex being gone, no longer here to cause conflict, it doesn't seem super bright for Gen 3's world. But with the past machinations of war finally destroyed and put to rest, humanity is finally free of past evils. With this being the last game in this timeline, we can only hope that further conflict doesn't further ravage this fragile state of humanity. Now you might ask, what was the point of all this? What was the point of all of this death, of all of this war? Last Raven strives to portray what happens to people when they are forced to live in constant conflict. It changes them, trains them to become content with death, and to become monsters. While characters might posture that they are fighting for something, it's just that, posturing. Jacko wants to control through violence. Zenaida wants to kill for the sake of refining her craft of violence, and Evangel wants to fill the void of competition through violence. This isn't to say that everyone in Last Raven's world is obsessed with conflict. Shyla is always thankful that the fighting is over, in every route. The kinds of people that would become a Raven in the first place are driven to the role for some reason or another, but in a world like 3rd Gen Armored Core, it draws in monsters and demons. This perpetual violence ironically traps Ravens into fighting for themselves, and not for a greater cause. That leaves the player, you. Will you fight for something, or fight for yourself? Will you steal freedom for yourself, or fight to end conflict? Who knows what the Last Raven protagonist chooses, but I guess that's for you to decide. There is one more challenge you can do. If you complete every normal mission in the game, there is a secret, final mission. It's not too important, but it is cool. You get a briefing from an unknown person asking you to defeat the final pulverizer, one that was teased at the end of the real credits. It's a cool fight, much better than a cheating AI, but it's still challenging. A pretty decent reward for sticking it out until the end. It doesn't have very many story implications, so I wouldn't say it's anywhere near essential to understanding the story. While nothing feels better than winning against a cheater, this fight is satisfying to beat. Post-game stuff that isn't playing the game again via another route is kind of limited, but you can do a few things. You can replay any mission you've already played, and look at a timeline to see where your missing missions are and in what hour, a pretty good feature for this kind of game. There's also another arena where you can fight anyone you've encountered in a mission on equal ground. You can unlock their emblem after you beat them here, so that's kinda cool. And that's pretty much it in terms of content that isn't a replay. Granted, replays in this game are fast, and there's a lot of unique missions in this game that makes up for not having a butt-ton of other modes. The big showcase weapon for this game is the Python, a right-handed railgun. It's light and has plenty of ammo, while doing pretty decent damage and a good range as well. While it has a recharge time and it can be slow, its insane cool factor more than makes up for it. The multiplayer of this game is also pretty typical fare, with the standard set in AC3 still being the case. Last Raven does have one feature that is great for tourney play, and that's the regulation system. You can ban specific parts and save it on the memory card as a regulation set. It's a good feature for tournament play, and it's better that it exists rather than not. Also, another thing, the framerate can tank badly if played in split screen, especially if you play against or with AI. Last Raven is an interesting beast, full of story, characters, and insane challenges. It's the ultimate love letter to fans, a farewell to an era of 9 core games. Last Raven is almost impossible to recommend due to its notoriety and expectations of the player, but it's one of my favorite games of all time. Piecing together everyone's motivations, uncovering the mysteries of 3rd Gen's setting, and dealing with the ramifications of past evils is personally enthralling. You need a lot of experience to beat the final challenges of this game, but if you pick your battles and use all of your resources, you can overcome this titan. The atmosphere is incredibly intense, the presentation is top tier for the entire series, and the speed of the game just absolutely gets me invested in the combat with its vicious and lethal gameplay. It's divisive, and only for certain people, but I'm people. The finale to Old Gen hits me hard, but where do we go from here? The style and formula has run its course. There aren't very many places we can go with this type of game. As a quick addendum, these games have become expensive, and I had trouble getting them running as a backup on my modded PS2. So that leaves emulation, but not all effects have been preserved, and the blur makes these emulated versions look kind of gross. While it is playable and it works okay, it's still flawed as of late 2023. These games deserve a re-release, regardless of how divisive they are. Nexus was an attempt as a soft reinvention of the series, and while I like it a lot, it doesn't achieve what it set out to do, having contradictions in its own design. It's got decent presentation, tons of content, and it has one of the best soundtracks of all time. But for all of its changes to control and ease of access, it has deep problems with its AC building and game flow that makes it repellent to new players. I think they realized that they needed to go from the ground up, a complete overhaul. So, with their expansion, they went back, and instead made the biggest love letter they could have, making for an impenetrable yet impressive outing. Last Raven continues the loads of content and amazing presentation, but uses its increased ease of access of instant retries and better balance to make the challenge much more intense. This challenge feeds into the narrative and makes each event much more impactful. The focus on characters helps the events and story immensely, and is something the series would keep going forward. Even if you hate Last Raven for, frankly, completely understandable reasons, I hope I was able to convey why I love it so much. The finale to the old style of Armored Core is my favorite of the set, but not my favorite game in this series. Everyone plays games for different reasons, and the level of challenge that strengthens the narrative helps create a game I love, but it's obviously not for everyone. If you've played a few old gen games and want to see how far the formula was taken, then give it a shot. Who knows, you might be one of the 24 people who like it. In my opinion, 3rd Gen is the most consistent in quality, and it's my personal favorite generation of Armored Core. There remains one question though. Where do we go from here? What is that greater reinvention that FromSoft so desperately wants? Well, they would show their hand in the advent of the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3 with Armored Core 4. Hey, thanks so much for watching this insanely long video. It really means so much. Now, this may be a surprise, but I'm tired. I love this series and I'm nowhere near done talking about it, but I need a quick break. I plan on making a little smaller video about some other stuff I love in video games. There is so much more to my love for games than just Armored Core. Don't worry, I wouldn't miss talking about For Answer for the world, but I need a quick refresher so I don't get burned out on the series. Do all of that commenting, liking, and subscribing that YouTube likes, and I'm going to attempt to finish Void Stranger, then check out Starish and the second story R for at least a little bit. See you later!